Alrighty, hello and welcome to this Shadow Dagger Bladedancer build. I want to start off by saying that for the past couple of patches, I've had two builds where I decided to do some heavy theory crafting and really invest in it. In doing so, produced extremely powerful builds. The first one was the super tank build, which I pushed to 305 waves and got bored and stopped pushing. That one worked out obviously really well. The second one is this build, where I noticed some things about Shadow Dagger that made me think that it could be very powerful. And lo and behold, it's actually more powerful. As I was building it, I found out some more things about it, which we'll go over here in a few minutes, that allow it to do insane damage. We're talking 400k dummy crits for one proc, with procs happening every 2 stacks. Normally it's 4 stacks, and I can hit it 5 or 6 times in one shot with, say, Sync Strike. It just annihilates bosses. It annihilates clearing. It's unbelievably powerful on the DPS side. So this is a build that I definitely consider to be overpowered, way overpowered. It's extremely powerful. So know that going in. You play this build and you play it like I played it, it is very OP. You are going to clear content extremely quickly because of it. All right, let's go into the pros and cons. So some of them we've already sort of talked about here. One huge pro is the damage. Both single target and AoE are unbelievably powerful. It annihilates bosses at a speed that just probably doesn't belong in the game. And it does the same thing on AoE. It has multiple ways of doing damage. It can do, like I said, a huge single target using Sync Strike. It can fly around using Shift to hit things at incredible speed. And it can drop smoke bombs to just light up an entire area and then just walk away. And then if you need a little extra damage, it can use Puncture to do it as well. So if you're looking for a high damage build that has no weaknesses on damage, this is definitely going to do that. Also, along with that shift thing, another huge positive is it's very fast. The clear speed on this is tremendous. It is definitely farm build worthy, probably S tier farm build, almost certainly S tier farm build worthy. If you're looking for something that you can farm quickly, efficiently, you're not going to find anything that's going to be much better than this, if anything at all that's better than this. So you are in a good spot as far as that goes. Okay, as far as downsides, negatives, it's not especially tanky. It's a little squishy. In fact, the way I generally run it, although it can be, like all the other builds, more built for Arena, and I'm going to try to give a general sense of how to build it for Arena. I'm still working on that part myself, but how to make it more tanky in the gearing section will certainly help. But know that things can kill you. I've died a couple of times on bosses just from putting up the wrong modifiers on the boss, and all of a sudden they've got frenzy and haste and I can't get out of something, and it just doesn't have a lot of room for error on those fights. But also, if it doesn't have a lot of room for you to make an error because stuff dies in like 10 seconds. So, but that's the downside of a build that's this focused on damage like this one is. You can always scale back some of that damage and get some tankiness out of it. But if you want to build it like this, like I'm going to display it here, you're going to be somewhat squishy. The other downside is it's pretty heavy on the investment side. It needs idols, and it needs suffixes on chest and helm to perform near the level it's at. We'll talk about why those are so important here in a minute. But if you don't have those, you are not going to get this kind of performance or anything like it. So definitely need to be ready to invest in it to get what you want out of it. Okay, as far as difficulty of play or skill level, it doesn't require a whole lot of skill to play, except for the fact that it's not very tanky. So if you're someone who tends to stand in things, you might find yourself somewhat frustrated with this build because it will take a lot of damage and you'll probably die a lot. I tend to run through echoes extremely fast, but I also know what the enemies do, and so I can usually avoid most of the damage taken. But if you're someone who's a little bit less experienced with that, you might die from time to time just going through the echoes, unless you slow it down, which you absolutely can. But if you're trying to get maximum speed out of this, just be aware that there's a skill level that goes along with that for this build, since it is not like the super tank where you could just throw on shield rush and run to the end and nothing's going to kill you because you're pretty much invincible. The other big thing for skill base is that we talked about the investment. So because of those two things, I think this is more of an advanced build. This is something that you should have a decent bit of experience with the game if you want to run it like it looks on here. You can get levels of this and it's still going to be very effective. But if you want to see what you're seeing on the screen, there's going to be some work on your part and some learning of the game to be able to play it at the speed at which it's being played at. Okay, as far as future patch considerations, there's no doubt in my mind this is getting nerfed at some point. Shadow Daggers needs to be nerfed because this is incredibly strong. And I suspect it'll probably happen with the idols. The idols have two benefits right now. Most people don't realize maybe either one of them, if not at least one of them. One is that it reduces the number of stacks you need to get before it procs Shadow Dagger. So at 150%, it's down to 2. At 50%, it's down to 1, or down to 3, excuse me. And it's also a damage multiplier. So on this build, I have 208% Shadow Dagger effect. That's 208% more damage that it's doing, which is insane. That's a huge number. I personally, if I were going to nerf this, I would take the more damage and make it an increased damage. And I think that would be enough to at least get it closer to in line with most of the other stuff. It's probably still a little OP, but it wouldn't be so crazy out there as it is right now. So just expect that if you want to play this, at some point I expect it to get nerfed. I don't really think we're going to get another hotfix this patch though, so it should be safe for like a month or two at least. That's what I think. There's a chance we could get like a crazy, out of nowhere hotfix mid-cycle, but that doesn't usually happen. So I'm gonna go ahead and bet that that doesn't here either. Okay, now we got all that out of the way. Let's go through the skills and see what makes this thing so incredible as far as damage goes. All right, we'll start with Puncture. This is the first skill you're gonna pick up as you're leveling. And the primary goal here is to get over to Death's Imprint, which will give you 100% Shadow Dagger chance. So you're going to take 2 in Splinter. I've got 2 here in Cross 4 because the melee range is nice. You only need 1 to get there, though, so just take 1 to start with. And then take 1 in Shatter. So the first thing you do, get over here, take all 4. Then you can pick up Cross Forward. You can pick up 3 in Timing for extra damage. But actually I'd do that last. The next thing I would do after this is I'd go over here and take Perforate, press the attack, Cadence of Death, and Mutilate. The one that's most important over here is press the attack for the frenzy duration. Mutilate is just a nice little, here's some extra health. And Cadence of Death gives you that little extra damage, and the area is really what's nice because you can hit a few more things with Shadow Daggers if you've got it. But this really is fully focused on Death's Imprint. That's all we really care about. The rest of this stuff is nice little extras. Press the attack gives you stacks a lot quicker, so that's a nice thing. But the rest of the stuff is really kind of icing on the cake. Okay, as far as shift, we're doing something similar here where we're trying to build towards Hidden Blades. What I would do though first, when you're leveling though, is take Shadow Recuperation, Swift Recovery 2 in here, and Momentum 3, because this is just will really speed up your leveling process a lot. 50% movement speed for 1.5 seconds on a 3-second cooldown is really fast. Once you've done that, I'd go ahead and take the 1 in Unseen Strike, the 2 in Broad Sweep, and then the 2 in Hidden Blade. I'd also go ahead and take at some point Shadow Slip, and 2 more in Swift Recover for the extra mana, and it's just the mana. And then when you get Shadow Cascade, you can go down here and pick up Lasting Presence and Dancing Shadows, which will allow you to proc Dancing Shadows, or excuse me, proc Shadow Cascade every time you shift, which is a huge damage option that will be really valuable when you're mapping. So when you're going through echoes, because it will kill a lot of the stuff along the way without you having to even stop. You just keep going, keep going, keep going, and everything's, or at least a lot of things are dying along the way. So more XP, more loot on the ground. Okay, next up is Smoke Bomb. Do not underestimate the power of this in this build. It can clear out an entire screen on its own. It can take out like echo bosses on its own. It's very strong. And the primary path here is similar to where we went with Puncture. We're going to take 1 in Thick Smoke, 3 in Eroding Fumes. We're going to take 4 in Swirling Fog and 1 in Knives in the Dark. Take Knives in the Dark first before you finish up Swirling Fog, then come back and take this. What this is going to do is it's going to cause you to pick up 2 stacks per second, because every time you get a slow stack, you're going to pick up a Shadow Dagger stack. And then this is going to double the speed of that, so you get 2 slow stacks per second. So you get 2 Shadow Dagger stacks per second. Once you've done that, there's only one other path that you need to take. Take 3 in Lingering Fumes. In fact, you can start with 2 in that. 3 is the threshold, because it jumps the total number of Shadow Daggers you can get once you're down to 2 stacks per proc from 4 to 5. So you'll actually proc Shadow Dagger 5 times once you've gotten to those thresholds. We'll talk more about those thresholds in the itemization system, but you will get to 2 on this. So you'll just, 1 Shadow Dagger, 2 Shadow Dagger, it procs, you do the damage. And then because of the speed that this goes and because of how long it lasts, you'll do that 5 times. The last thing will be Smoke Blades. This will significantly increase your damage, especially early on, but even later on. And this is actually double dipping because it's melee damage and throwing attack damage. And Shadow Daggers has both the melee and throwing attack tag on it. And so it will benefit from both of these. So this one is really strong. If you stand in smoke bomb while it goes off, you will increase your damage, which will increase the damage of your Shadow Daggers significantly. Okay, next up is Shadow Cascade. A lot of damage is coming from Shadow Cascade, especially when you're shifting, which is endgame, one of your primary sources. So, of course, like the other things in here, we're going to prioritize getting to our Shadow Dagger stacks, which is Shadow Elegance. So we'll take 2 in Dismantle, 1 in Crushing Darkness, 4 in Dagger Dance, and 1 in Porcupine's Wrath. And that will get us to Shadow Elegance. Once you've done that, if you don't have Sync Strike yet, just go ahead and take 2 in Shadow Torrent and 3 in Shadow Flourish. Once you pick up Sync Strike, you're definitely going to want to take 1 in Onslaught and 3 in Fight in the Shadows, which will allow you to regen your mana after you use Sync Strike and then shift out of it. Probably will be shift. Shift will probably be the way that you'll do that. That's the way I suggest. Yeah, and that will get you going on Shadow Cascade. You've got the mana that comes back. You've, of course, got your Shadow Dagger stacks. And then Shadow Flourish is a really nice way to increase your own Fizz damage, which Fizz is another tag for Shadow Dagger. So this will definitely improve the damage from it. Last thing you'll take is Synchronized Strike. This is your boss killer along with Smoke Bomb. You'll use both of these to do tremendous damage. So we are once again going to make sure we pick up Shadow Dagger on hit. So start with 4 in Coordinated Cuts, and you'll take Umbrella Assassination, which is the Shadow Dagger on hit. You're then going to want to increase the number of shadows you have, and you're going to want to pinpoint where you put them so that they land where you land. So to get the number of shadows up, we're going to take 1 in Growing Darkness. You'll take 2 to start off with in Foreshadowing, then 1 in Dark Allies. This gets you 2 more. From there, you'll take 1 in Dynamics, 2 in Art of the Blade, and then 1 in Perfect Coordination, which causes them to jump inward towards your position. This is how you make sure that all of your shadows attack or hit the boss that you're trying to kill. Once you've done that, you can round it out with 4 in Razor Strikes, which gives you 200% Fizz Res Shred chance per hit, and you're going to hit a bunch of times, so you're going to basically shred all of their armor on 1 hit. And then you can finish up by cleaning up Foreshadowing, taking the rest of the points in there, which increases damage from using Synchronized Strike. Okay, that is all of the skills. Let's go ahead and get into the passives. Okay, so there's not a whole lot of like must-haves in the base class. This tends to build the same way for me in most of my builds. So 8 in Swift Assassin for that attack speed and the physical damage base. This is even stronger early game when you're going to be relying on Puncture, but the Fizz damage base on it and the attack speed both are still nice going forward. We'll take 1 in Guile. We'll take 1 in Twin Blade so we can dual wield. We're going to take, I actually finished up Evasion later. I start off with 1 in that and then 5 in Agility. But at some point you want to get 5 in Evasion because you're going to run most of the time, and so the damage taken while moving is really good. And Sapping Strikes is how you will regenerate your mana outside of Sync Strike, or excuse me, Shadow Cascade on Sync Strike. Excuse me, Shadow Cascade on Shift. There we go. And this also gains health on hits, so with your puncture, so that's pretty nice. Once you've done that, everything else goes into Bladedancer. So I've got 8 of 8 in Pursuit. The move speed and the melee damage are nice. Melee damage, again, is a tag for Shadow Daggers. Cloak of Shadows for the Dexterity and Glancing Blow. I've currently taken 3 of 8 in Shroud of Dust. This is what I'm currently working on. So I took this later on in the build. 8 of 8 here and once is great for more base damage, and the dodge rating of hit recently is great as well. I took 1 in Skia Synthesis. This was actually to get up towards higher stuff, and it's nice too. It increased shadow damage and health gain on shadow creation, so it's not a bad node by any stretch. I have taken 2 in Blood Dance for the leech. Earlier game, if you're finding that you need more leech, you probably won't. But if you find that you do, you can take more in this. But 2% for me is more than enough to get all of my health back on 1 hit because we do so much damage. I've taken 5 of 8 in Flash of Steel. And 10 of 10 in Weapons of Choice. We are running Sword and Dagger, which is 150% crit multi, which runs really well with this build. 6 of 6 in Asuvan's Pact for the dodge rating and the increased damage while at full health. He'll be at full health most of the time. The dodge rating is really nice as well. Argent Veil is one of my favorite nodes in the Bladedancer tree. Get this earlier so that you have a nice defensive buff. So you get Silver Shroud when you drop below 70% health. You get 1,000 ward. You'll also get a guaranteed dodge off of it. I'm also taking 1 in Critical Eye, which was just to get to all in for the crit multi. You may have noticed that I haven't taken anything really in crit strike chance, which is because Shadow Daggers is a guaranteed crit. So nicely, we don't have to worry about that at all, which we'll talk about here in this section that's coming up, which is the itemization. So let's go ahead and just get into that right now. Okay, as I mentioned, Shadow Daggers is a guaranteed crit. So we don't have to invest in crit chance at all, just crit multi. But what else does Shadow Daggers do? Why are we pushing in the directions we are? So let's talk about Shadow Daggers, what its tag is. You won't find its tag in the actual skill itself, like in the tooltips. We actually know about it because Dammit data mined it. Dammit's the creator of Last Epoch Tools and Grim Dawn Tools, or Grim Tools, excuse me. So shout out to Dammit for data mining that. And what Shadow Daggers has is pretty crazy. It's got the melee tag, it's got the throwing tag, it's got the spell tag, so any base damage from any of those 3 sources will count towards it. It's also got the fizz tag, it's got the dex tag. Also, the added damage effectiveness is 300%. So if you add 1 added damage, it counts as 3 added damage. So added damage runs really well with the build. And so you're going to see we focus on fizz, and we focus on added damage, and we focus on crit multi in the build. I have built this mostly for damage. My current build is not that tanky as I mentioned before. I am making some changes towards being a little bit more tanky to see how it does in the arena. So if you want to be more arena focused, you're going to want to focus more on like resistances and dodge than maybe this build is currently at. Okay, let's go into where we're at though. So the primary number 1 thing that you need to get, as we talked about earlier, is Shadow Dagger Effect. You're going to get that on your idols, you're going to get that on your chest, and you're going to get that on your helmet. You want to get those tier 5s, and you want to get the highest ones you get in the idol. What do? They do 2 things. You get fewer stacks needed for a proc. You can get it down to 2 currently, and you get a more damage multiplier from effects. So 24% increased Shadow Daggers effect means that you actually do 24% more damage with Shadow Daggers, which is crazy. It's really, really, really strong. There are breakpoints for the Shadow Daggers proc. So to get the stacks down, at 50% Shadow Dagger effect, you drop from 4 needed to 3. And at 150%, you drop from 3 to 2. Now, we don't know if you can get down to 1. Llama, another community member, believes that the next breakpoint would be at 250. I think it's at 300. If it's at 250, then 2 tier 6s on your chest and your helm will get you there. If it's at 300, there's no way to actually get there. So either way, 2 tier 6 Shadow Daggers effect is extremely difficult to get, damn near impossible. So I would only focus on getting to the 2 because that's the only one that's realistic, and it's actually not all that hard to get to it as long as you can farm up the suffixes and the idols. So I'm focusing primary Shadow Dagger's effect on my idols. The other stuff in here is nice, like the armor shred duration, but really the Shadow Dagger's effect is what you want more than anything else. I've also got a leech on here and a damage while wielding a sword, since I am wielding a sword, so that's really nice. But this is also a secondary idol. Get the best thing you can get here for either fizz damage, damage wielding a sword, damage wielding a dagger, and leech is really good, armor shred's good. The other things that you need to get, of course, are the armor and the helmet suffixes. Get those at tier 5. You can see I've got tier 5 here and highly rolled, and I've got tier 5 here and highly rolled. And the other stuff in here is maybe not all that good. This actually ended up working out pretty well, although the base is actually bad. Like crit strike chance is not good for me. But everything else on here is really good, so I've kept it. So I've got shred armor on here, that's good. Damage while wielding dagger, damage with the sword's really good. Vitality and dexterity are really good on the prefixes for this, but make those your secondary worry. Get the damage first, the Shadow Dagger's effect. On the helmets, CDR is great because you can shift quicker. A set item, set resistance here is really good. And you see I've got increased damage wielding a dagger along with the Shadow Dagger's effect. As far as weapons go, I really like a deicide sword with fizz base and fizz increased. We had a long discussion about whether or not increased fizz or crit multi is better. Over 500% increased crit multi tends to outpace it for a while, but then I've also got an absolutely insane amount of crit multi. I'm at 636% on this build, so at that point increase kind of took back over. There's a lot of math that goes into it. I would just suggest, because you're going to get a lot of crit multi just from your passives, go ahead and put increased fizz on this and then the base fizz. As far as the suffixes, frailty's good, chill's good, stun's okay. I just happen to have stun there because I've got nothing better. Slow is okay, but your prefixes are your bigger concern. The other weapon, which is going to be a dagger, you have a choice. I actually flip between 2. I use Smoke Weaver when I am running through echoes, when I'm speed farming, so to speak. And then if I hit a boss, especially one who has DR, I switch to an Obsidian Dagger with base melee fizz and increased fizz. And that just gives me even more damage than I have from the Smoke Weaver. But the Smoke Weaver is a ton of damage by itself. Like, you don't actually need to make that switch if you were trying to min-max Obsidian Daggers, an increase in damage, but will you even really notice it? I'm not even sure you will. So Smoke Weaver is great in this build. If you don't have Smoke Weaver, then just go with the Obsidian Dagger, and you're still going to be fast. The difference isn't going to be huge. There's 34% increased CDR on shifts on this, so there is a difference, but you're still really fast even with an Obsidian Dagger, so don't worry too much about it. Okay, the rest of the stuff on here, of course, we got move speed, set items, crit avoidance. This is mostly your defenses. I did pick up fizz damage, throwing attack damage on a relic. The throwing attack damage I like to replace. The fizz damage is nice, but set resistances might be something you'd rather have on those. Depends on whether or not you're trying to go for maximum damage or whether you actually want to, make sure you're survivable. I am currently running a bone amulet. If I can get my resistances elsewhere, I'll switch this up to an oracle amulet, so I'll have the damage over time reduction. And you can see I've only got fizz damage and fizz pen. Again, maximum DPS is what I went for with this build to start with. I would obviously rather have some suffixes with defense on this eventually, but this is where we're at right now. I really like movement speed rings. I think those are great for this build since it loves to go fast. Throwing attack fizz damage might be a surprising one, but remember, throwing attack is a tag for Shadow Daggers. So you can use throwing attack and actually increase your base damage. It has a 300% multiplier, so basically I'm adding 36 base damage just by putting that throwing attack on there. And then I've got set, fizz resistance, crit avoidance, pretty much the same stuff we've been talking about. Again, here's more throwing attack. This isn't even tier 5 yet, so I actually have more space here to do more damage. Dexterity is a nice stat for this, always. So we got more stat here, dodge, crit. I need more dodge, honestly. But I was trying to get to a nice base level. This is still a work in progress. It's just so powerful already that I wanted to go ahead and get the guide out so y'all can see what it looks like. Even if it's not min-max, it's incredibly strong. So that covers the stats. It's maybe a little more complex than some of the other builds I've done, but just focus melee base, fizz base. Make sure you get your Shadow Dagger's effect, throwing attack on the rings, and of course your resistances, dodge if you can get it, crit avoidance, that sort of stuff. Pretty much standard rogue stuff with the exception of the weird Shadow Dagger's stats that you can pick up. Okay, let's go ahead and get into the rotation. This one is more complex than typical, but it's really more just because there's situationally different things you can do. So, of course, when you are just mapping, going through the echoes, shift your way through enemies, try to go straight through them, because doing so allows you to put another Shadow Dagger on them, because shift itself will place a Shadow Dagger when you use it. And then, of course, the Shadow Cascade effect will also place a Shadow Dagger on, allowing you to proc, hopefully, at least one Shadow Dagger proc. When you are in a large pack, you need to clear it quickly. Use Smoke Bomb, just drop it. It's kind of like a fire and forget, and it will do insane damage, and everything in the area will die. If you need a little extra damage on an enemy, or just want to quickly dispatch of one, Puncture is a great way to do it. It also is your mana regen. And when you want to take care of a high HP single target, Synchronized Strike and then Shift Out will do an absolute ton of damage. And if it's enough to survive that one hit, use Smoke Bomb and then keep cycling through Sync Strike and Shift, using your Puncture to regain mana whenever you need it. Should you find yourself in some sort of danger, you can always drop a decoy. We don't have decoy set up on our skills and specs, so we don't need it to use it. It's just a taunt, and you don't need Shadow Cascade on your bar, so it opens up a decoy for that use. I rarely ever use decoy, but if you find yourself in a sticky situation, it definitely can save your life. So I do recommend putting it on your bar and having it available if need be. That is the rotation. I hope you like what you see. It is, like I said, very OP, so if you're looking for a build that will make you feel really badass, this is the build for you. I assure you, once you get it going, and even early game, it is really strong. Shadow Daggers just hit really hard from the get-go, and they never stop, and they just continue to hit harder and harder and harder. So I anticipate anyone who decides to play this, even if you don't have the idols, you don't have the suffixes, you'll still have a good time with it. And once you get those, it's going to be pretty incredible how much damage you can do. And on my stream yesterday, I was just continuously making comments about how ridiculous it felt to be able to do this much damage. So yeah, if you're looking for that kind of experience, I hope you enjoy it. All right, thank you so much for checking out this video. If you would like to see how I make these builds, be a part of making them, offer your own suggestions, or just ask questions about LE in general or builds I've made, feel free to join us. I stream on Twitch about 6 days a week, usually. I am there most every day. Would love to have you. Also, if you just have other questions you want to ask anytime, or want to just join our community, which is a growing community, we have a Discord where we talk all things LE and other games, and even other topics that are not necessarily gaming related. Feel free to join us there. All right, thank you so much. Enjoy your time in LE, enjoy the build, and I'll see you all again real soon.